Chris, you were talking before about the equivalent of a crone for men, and my own answer to that is that by the time you get old, you have only two choices. One is to be a sage, and the other is to be a curmudgeon. And I'm trying very hard not to be a curmudgeon, because I could fall into that really easily. But I'd rather be a kindly sage.
Welcome in to Menfolk Journeys, the podcast of great conversations with men. I'm your host, Chris Foster, and we're going to explore how we wear this beautiful and confusing mantle of manhood in the 21st century. Look, I get it. In public life, a lot of men are knuckleheads. But in private life, we can be thoughtful and we can be reflective if we have the right conversation, if we feel comfortable talking about our story. And we all have a great story to tell. And we can all learn from those stories. We can learn about who we've been, who we are, and who we want to be. And that's why we're going to have this conversation, so we can learn from other men just like us. And tonight, we're going to have a conversation with my new friend, Don Akchin. Don has written a book called The AfterWork. It's reflections and ideas about what it means to live life after retirement. And retirement is in air quotes, right? Retirement may be from a career, but not retirement from life. By the way, you can find The AfterWork on Amazon. And the book is a large part of his reflections, and his reflections are so deep and interesting because he realizes he's got purpose, he's got energy, and at 74, my friend Don is flourishing. This is a wonderful conversation about someone who's finding flourishing at 74. Welcome in to Menfolk Journeys. Well, all right, Don Akchin, welcome in.
Well, thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be here, Chris.
Outstanding. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, my name is Don Akchin. I'm 74. I live with a wife that with me celebrated our 50th anniversary a few weeks ago.
Woo! Give it up. Let's go. Congratulations.
Yeah, it feels good. And I'm amazed because I still have all my teeth and I'm not using a cane. And I thought that's what you had to be by the time you had 50 years together. But times have changed.
That's awesome.
I've got a couple of grown kids,
Okay.
44 and 38, and 4 grandchildren.
Wow.
Yeah, I was born in Shreveport, Louisiana, and now I live in Baltimore, and I am retired and writing.
Wonderful. Well, I want to wind back a little bit.
Okay.
Firstly, congratulations on 50 years of marriage. Congratulations on grandchildren. You were married when you were 24 years old.
That's right.
All right. So at the time when you got married, Don, did you think that you were young to be married, or did it seem normal at the time?
At the time, it seemed normal to me because I'd graduated from college. I had a job. I thought marriage was pretty much the next step.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so that felt right.
It felt right. One thing that's interesting to me is that you said you're retired and you're writing a lot, and at 74, congratulations, you seem really healthy and vibrant. There's, they say, like 40 is the new 30 and, blah, 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 and 70 is the new 50 and blah, blah, blah. But what I'd love to do is kind of talk about these models of aging and redefining what it means to get older. So I'm 55. I'm 20 years younger than you are. And when I was growing up and I saw 55-year-olds, I was like, oh my gosh, you're old. But also, too, growing up in Pittsburgh, where I grew up, a 55-year-old, very different than I see 55-year-olds now in Southern California. So when you were 24 and getting married and starting your family, did you look at people who were like 64 and 74 and think, oh my gosh, you're so old?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what I meant when I said it's 50 years and I still have my teeth. I mean,
Uh-huh.
to me, the idea of somebody who had been married for 50 years was a doddering person on the downhill slope,
Hmm.
and I don't feel like that at all.
Right. Of course
And
not.
and the people in my cohort, people that I'm friends with, don't feel that way at all. We feel like we've got a lot of life left in us and a lot of things we want to do.
Yeah. I can hear a little bit of the Shreveport,
Mm.
Louisiana in when you say things, which is awesome. Um, so you live in Baltimore now. Do you miss the Shreveport place that you grew up? Have you thought about going back? Do you ever go back?
I go back to Louisiana, where some of my family still lives,
Oh, wonderful.
um, to partake of the. Well, I say I'm going back to see my family, but in fact, I'm there to take part in the food and the
Mm,
music, and I miss
sure.
both of those.
I bet you do.
But I didn't like living there, and I'm very content living in Baltimore.
Excellent.
I wanted to live in a larger city with more um, cultural advantages, more
Hmm.
educational opportunities, all of that.
Sure. Well, that makes sense. I think that when you start getting older and you transplant yourself to the place where you kind of want to be versus the place where you're born, I think it helps you kind of cultivate your life, rather than the life of the people that you see around you.
Hmm.
I felt that when I moved to San Diego from Pittsburgh in my early 20s, and I never left. Um, so one question that I would have for you is: you've got four grandchildren now. Are those grandchildren adulty grandchildren?
Oh no, the oldest is almost 13.
Okay,
The youngest is 6.
excellent. Well, congratulations. So tell me about that. What is it like being a grandfather, knowing that you're not responsible for the day to day, but you're still engaged and active in their life?
Well, it's much better than being the parent. Um, I wasn't planning to go back to that anytime soon.
Uh-huh.
Um, it's really exciting. They are 4 amazing people, each with their own personality.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have a special relationship with the oldest because she is a writer, and
Excellent.
she and I have author talks from time to time, where she asks me about how her stories are reading and which technique to use, and what if she gets an agent and the agent finds out she's only 12 years old. Important things like that. So that's
That's
a lot of
awesome.
fun. That's a lot of
That
fun.
is that's a special bond that hopefully someday I'll experience. Does it make you think about how you're aging when you can be so intimately connected with a youngster like that?
It does, but that's probably not where I feel aging the most. I think I feel aging the most when I'm in a store and I'm invisible to somebody in their 20s. I don't
Hmm.
exist. They can't see me. Um, there there was a very funny skit when you remember the show Grace and Frankie, or Frankie and Grace, or
Yeah, sure do.
they had a really good scene where they're in a store, they're in a quickie mart or something, and the clerk responds to the blonde young thing but doesn't see them at all, and they do everything but steal stuff to get his attention. And that's how it feels sometimes being old. It's like there's that whole who I used to be going by, and they don't see me at all, and they don't see me as part of their world.
Wow. When did you start experiencing that? When did you notice that you experienced that invisibility?
Probably in my late 60s.
Interesting. That must have been a really painful shock and experience.
My own story on that is that when I was in my late 60s, I was not terribly optimistic about being old.
Hmm.
And since I've had a turnaround. And in fact, what I have been doing for more than 4 years now is writing a weekly blog or an email newsletter, really, about aging gracefully and aging with purpose and joy. And I've
Uh-huh.
been really finding the positive sides of aging and realizing that aging today is very different from what it's ever been before.
It sure is. Now, I'm going to ask you, Don, what was the moment of transformation in your mindset where it went from pessimism more towards optimism and vitality and kind of embracing your age, if you are embracing your age?
I'm embracing it, yes. And
Wonderful.
I would say it was about the time I turned 70.
Hmm.
And I can't remember a specific trigger, but I certainly was reading a lot of things. And one of the things that was very convincing to me was reading that people who accepted their aging and were optimistic about what they had in front of them lived an average of 7.5 years longer than people who were pessimistic about aging.
Yeah.
And that was a provocative finding. And so I said, I'm definitely going to be in the extra 7.5 year set.
Heck
So
yeah.
yeah,
I think that we have known each other for about 9 minutes and 5 seconds. So what you might surmise by just chatting with me is I'm naturally optimistic, right? I'm
yes,
naturally kind of enthusiastic. I've got a joyful countenance and a playful countenance that just is in the core. So I can really appreciate the power. It's a cliche, but they're cliches for a reason, right? The power of a positive mindset. But what I think is so fascinating for me is that you made a change. Like you chose to have a positive mindset about aging instead of going in a downward spiral. Um, do you think and so you're in your late 60s. So how long had you been quote unquote retired from your job when you started to feel that way?
um, a couple years,
Maybe. Do you think that was part of it, that you had this
sure.
career?
Well, it wasn't that I was missing my career, but I was finding that retirement was not what I was expecting.
Hmm.
Um, I, if I can go back to that time a little bit and bear with me a little as I reminisce.
Please do.
Um, I retired myself because I had been self-employed. So I went from self-employment to self-retired, and it was a fairly easy transition to do that. What I thought I was going into was going to be my eternal summer vacation, where I could get to do whatever I wanted to do, and it would be wonderful. And I didn't have um, any pressure or any responsibility. And what I wasn't expecting was how isolated I was.
Hmm.
And this was partly my own fault because I embarked on writing novels because I had decided when I was a young boy that this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to write books. And I had been writing for 45 years for other people, but I
Mm-hmm.
hadn't really written anything for myself that stood up. So I retired and I started writing novels. And I wrote two of them. They are still unpublished,
Hmm.
but what I found is that when you're writing a long project like that, you are very much on your own. You don't get feedback. You don't get anybody saying, way to go, keep going. You really have to be your own motivator. And sometimes I had it and sometimes I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And, uh, and at the end of the first 4 years, I said, this is not working for me. This is not what
Hmm.
I thought it was going to be. And I was fortunate at that time. I was solicited over social media by a coach who was coaching creative people and helping them go forward. And I talked to her, and she said, yeah, what you'll get is you'll get a support group, like a writer's group of other creatives, and you'll get lessons on how to improve your mindset and things
Mm-hmm.
like that. I said, well, this is great. I
Yeah.
signed up. And within a few months, it was wonderful because I did have a group of other creatives I was talking to, and she was very helpful. And early on, I complained about, not getting the feedback. And they said, well, why don't you write shorter stuff and put it out? It won't take as long and you'll get feedback sooner. And I thought, I should have thought of that.
But why would you? But but you don't think of that because you're yourself, right? And I think that you probably, without even knowing it, stepped into a trap, right? You finished your career where you had purpose and engagement with people. Even though when you were writing, you were always kind of working on something. Then you had working just for yourself in a solitary endeavor.
Right.
That is a perfect recipe for depression.
No kidding.
And then especially if you're older, you will be more sensitive to feeling alone because you're feeling alone. And then suddenly you look and you go to the store and nobody sees you, then you really feel alone.
Exactly. Well, and I am prone to depression anyway.
Sure.
It is a characteristic. And I've been medicated for 30, 35 years, and I have a very good balance and have been able to function very well. But that is my natural tendency, is to get depressed.
Right. So, oh my gosh, right. You had everything you needed to pull you in, but you didn't. You managed to avoid literally getting sunk and sucked into the quagmire. Well, so here from Shreveport, the bayou, right?
You did bayou, that. Right? Yeah, the swamp. Here's what happened. I took this idea of writing short, and about that time, I read about this new product called Substack, which seemed to be a perfect place to write newsletters. And I thought, I've always written for my peer group. What can I write about? Well, I could write about the experience of aging.
Perfect.
We're all going through that. And then I began writing a weekly piece on Substack that, as I say, has been going for 4 years.
Congratulations.
And I get feedback every week.
Wonderful. And you write what you know, right? That's one of the number one rules of writer, right? Write what you know about.
I write what I know from my experience, also from research. I'm reading everything about the topic.
That's great. And also, too, it's a new passion because what I love about your exploration, Don, first of all, I apologize for mispronouncing your last name. So
everybody does. Akchin, but Akchin. You know what?
I want to get it right, so that's good.
I've heard them all. H and Houchin, act, whatever,
including what I said. But so Don, what I think is interesting, A, you write about what you know, but then B, when you start doing the research and getting more interested in it, I would have to believe, and I guess this is more of a question than a statement, that as you get more interested in aging and more self-reflective about your own aging, suddenly becomes much more interesting as a topic. And then you start thinking about, okay, well, how do I want to control my own aging experience?
That's true. From what I'm reading about, I've done a lot more exercise and a lot more healthy eating. And a lot of things that I've read about have become part of my life.
That's wonderful. Now, I've got a question for you. So there's a trope. Trope is probably the wrong word. But there is the icons within all of humanity that spans culture and time, where you have a maiden and mother and crone, because the maiden clearly is a young girl before menstruation and before being able to carry children. The mother is the one who actually has a child and nurtures that child. And the crone, which in the past it was probably a more flattering term. Right now it's not it's a great term, but bear with me, right? That's the icon, right? Maiden, mother, crone, right? And then the older woman who is past childbearing years and past child rearing years, right. Suddenly is the wise woman. She's the one that has the third eye. She has seen everything. It is kind of funny because I was thinking about this, Don, and I don't think that there's a parallel for men, right? The boy, you could argue there's the boy, there's the hero, there's the tribal elder. And maybe that is. Maybe that is. And then if that's so, and if that's true, it's kind of an affront that the elder might feel invisible when they go to the store instead of revered, right, and honored.
Well, I want to tell you some things that I've learned about that. As I think you know, I've written a book very recently about what I call the AfterWork,
Love
which
it.
is that period after one stops one's career. And one of the things I found is that a tremendous number of men, particularly those who have been very driven by their career all their lives, have a very difficult time when they enter the afterwork, because not only have they lost their career and there's this big gaping hole in their life where that used to be, but they've also lost some of the things they weren't expecting, like the respect that came with the title that they held,
Interesting.
or the perks that come from being an executive and having a secretary who does all of your emails, or your Xeroxing, or getting you the coffee. And they come home, and if there's a wife around, they say, maybe this can be my staff. And the wife says, "You got to be kidding."
Right, that does not land well. It is interesting because, first of all, congratulations on the publication of your book. Secondly, I freaking love the title, right? Because there is, I'm sure you're aware, the parallel of the afterlife, right? It's the afterwork. And for a lot of men, I'm sure what happens is after they stop working, they're like, I used to be somebody, or I had this life. What is my life now? Right? It's like after an afterlife. And what you're saying is, no, it's not an afterlife. It's just after work. That's all that is, because there's so much life ahead of you.
And that's part of the thinking. The other thinking that I had was that retirement, as it's been pictured for years, is really not available to most of us anymore.
How do you mean by that?
What I mean is, if you have $2 million in the bank, you can probably afford to retire. But if you're one of the 90% of the Americans who don't, it's going to be very hard for you to be able to afford not to do anything for the next 25 or 30 years. And that is, in fact, what you are looking at, because we are now looking at much longer lives. And if you retire at 60 or 65, you may have 2 or 3 more decades. That is too long to sit in your lounge chair drinking Mai Tais and watching beach volleyball or whatever you expect to do. It just does. And you can't play golf for 30 years either. It just doesn't make sense. It's enough time, though, that you can do something brand new, start another career, or take a hobby or a dream that you had when you were a kid that you never got a chance to do, and try it out.
Yeah. Well, and also I think too, that also expands that role of the elder that we are talking about, because
yes,
I have to believe, Don, that you have a crap ton of lessons to teach other people in a variety of environments, because you've lived long enough. You've seen things that younger folks haven't seen. I mean, I at this stage, I really like my age. And I'm so much smarter than I was when I was 35. Thank goodness. Right? Thank goodness. I'm trying to at least pay attention, right?
I think that's why we're so fascinated by those films where people go back in time and live again, knowing what they know now,
right?
As teenagers or as 20-year-olds. Very appealing, but it's not going to happen.
It is very appealing. A, it's very, very appealing, and B, you're right, it isn't going to happen. It's a fool's dream. And I do want to say, though, that the time that we have to start learning is still ahead of us. So for you to mention that, at 65, if you choose to stop working, you've got another 2 or 3 decades. we are living longer. So I'm reading this book now by Dr. Peter Attia called Outlive.
Yes.
Familiar? Okay.
I am.
And for those who don't know it, Outlive is it's less of a how-to, and it's less of a book that tells you what to eat, what not to eat, etc. But it's more of a playbook to say, here's how you can start planning for healthy aging. I'm still getting through it, so I haven't read all the way. But if you start thinking about how to plan for healthy aging so you can live really well for as long as you can, you do have to plan and prepare for it, but it's very possible. So what I love about your change of mindset from your late 60s to now is, and I guess it's a question I'll ask you, do you feel younger and more vibrant than you did even 6 years ago?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
When I started writing the newsletter, I felt like I had finally found my voice, and I had found the right medium for my voice. And I was putting out my ideas, working with words, which I've always done, and getting feedback from people on a weekly basis that let me know that somebody was reading what I was writing.
Sure.
At a little aside, I used to be a journalist. I worked for daily newspapers, and if I got 2 letters a year,
yes,
it was astounding, and one of them would be trying to convert me to another religion. So that was all the feedback you got.
So make it 1 letter a year.
Made 1 letter a year. But here I have a select number of readers. It's a little over 1,000, and and I hear from between 10 and 20 every week, and it feels great. So I feel very, very much younger, and very much
that must be
filling my creativity. Doing what I want to do.
That's wonderful. That must be very recharging for you too. Like the energy that you're giving out comes back to you from the feedback and the engagement.
It's great. I feel more in balance than I have ever before.
That's so interesting, Don, because you never know when in your life you have that intersection of what you love, what you're good at, and what people need. Right? You don't quite know. And I think that in some instinctive way, people, men especially, are all searching for that, right? Because that becomes that capital P of purpose.
Right.
This is purpose for me. My drawing instructor from college, Barry Shockman, he was awesome. He's like about 5'3". He's from the Bronx. He only ate Ritz crackers and he smoked about 2 packs a day. He was a former lightweight boxer, tough as nails, but an incredible draftsman. Like the least likely person you would see on the surface to be an extraordinary draftsman. But what he said to us, he said, look, I can teach you how to draw over time, but most importantly, I have to teach you how to see. I have to teach you how to see drawings that go in 3 dimensions, because you're taking charcoal on a piece of paper and it's 2 dimensions, but you have to make it look like it goes back in space. It's 3 dimensions. If you can't see it, you can't do it. So first thing you have to see. And he said, some of you might not be able to see at the end of the course. If so, that's my fault. He said, but also too, you don't know when you will flourish. You could flourish at 19. You could flourish at 22. You might flourish at 32. You might flourish at 72. You don't know. But just be ready when the flourishing happens. So do you think like now you're really flourishing?
Oh, absolutely. I feel like I have been trying to get somewhere without much success. And now at 74, I'm on the cusp of becoming an overnight sensation.
That is fantastic. It only took you 74 years.
I know.
No, I'm kidding.
It's a miracle.
It's a miracle. But what I love about that, though, is that the storylines for people, I don't know, Don, the older I get, the more I'm a believer that your storyline is yours. It's your own story. It's nobody else's. And, you have the opportunity now not only to feel like you're flourishing, but and to practically flourish. But like I said, you've got you could have another 30 years. You could be a $1.04, $1.14. It doesn't matter how long you live. And you're at this really interesting phase where as you're flourishing, you're seeing your 13-year-old granddaughter come into her moment too, being a young girl. And you know what I love about that story, Don? She's watching you flourish. She's old enough to be aware that you are really flourishing.
I hadn't thought of that. I hope she sees it that way. I don't really know. But she knows that I'm older and that I've written, so I know something about what she wants to do. So that's good.
Well, also, too, when you were in your dark times 6 years ago, she was 7 years old. She might not have been aware of it, but she's aware of your positive energy now at 13, 14.
That's a good way of thinking about it. I like that.
Right? And so what I love about that is that her formative memories of her grandfather will be right at your peak moment.
Chris, you were talking before about the equivalent of a crone for men. And my own answer to that is that by the time you get old, you have only two choices. One is to be a sage, and the other is to be a curmudgeon. And I'm trying very hard not to be a curmudgeon because I could fall into that really easily. But I'd rather be a kindly sage.
We'll be right back. I think you are. I love that. And I think, Don, the most important thing you said about that in that phrase is that you want to be the kindly sage. I think that makes all the difference. I think that if you want to be that type of person, you can. I think the mind is so much more powerful than we appreciate. I've got a good friend of mine. He's actually one of the episodes, Mark. He's diagnosed with cancer. He's incredibly fit. We call him the honey badger because he just doesn't give a shit. He's unbelievable, this man, in mind and spirit. But he says, I'm going to choose to be happy every day. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to think about this every day and move in that direction. And the fact that you just said you want to be the kindly sage, ergo you are the kindly sage.
Well, a sage that knows not to give his opinion unless somebody specifically asks for it.
Isn't that wisdom?
I hope so.
So with that, clearly you think about then where you are now. What kind of lessons did you learn when you were younger that you've carried now to your mature years? Because even now that you talk about wanting to be the kindly sage, you've learned enough not to give your opinion unless asked. What other lessons have you learned that you acknowledge and identify that you learned?
Because I was trained to be a journalist, one of the most important things always to me was getting the truth right. So I still bridle at inaccuracies or at misleading statements, and I still believe it's very important to give an accurate accounting. And I've always tried to do that in all my dealings and every kind of work that I've done. I think I've always been a believer in being upfront and honest, sometimes to my detriment. There's times when you're not supposed to be honest or you're supposed to shadow it a little bit. And I didn't learn that. I just always, took the straight and narrow way. well, I really don't like you, and this is why, you know, and that didn't always fly. Uh, so, so I've also found that humor is helpful. It can be dangerous, but it's helpful.
Hmm.
I've always tried to create a light atmosphere when I'm at work with other people. Um, I was once in a job interview, uh, in the last phases of the interview for a position at a university, and the dean who was doing the hiring said, "What do you consider to be the three most important things?" And I said one or two that were perfectly ordinary, and then I said the last was having fun. And he said, "Fun? What does that have to do with work?"
Oh my gosh.
And A, I didn't get that job, and B, I'm so glad.
You bet. Of course, right? I mean, if there's no joy in work, that's really hard. Human beings were designed for joy and play,
I
right?
agree.
It's so important for us to do that. And I think that, when you start talking about being honest and looking at things straight with accuracy, do you think that that has helped you when you made that switch, that light bulb turn on about your own aging, where you were going to be not hyperbolic and not misleading to yourself, but accurate to yourself and straight to yourself?
Um, I don't think of it quite that way, but I think what is closer to truth for me is that I have perspective.
Okay.
And there are many perspectives that one can have. And as your friend Mark says, I can choose the perspective of looking at the bright side.
Mm-hmm.
And so I make that choice whenever I can.
Yeah. And I think for some of the ways in which men go through life, they define themselves by that mental choice. I know a lot of older men who are really unhappy and who don't laugh. I know a lot of older men who are happy and do laugh. Um, have you always had a playful countenance?
I think, well, let me be honest, since we're being honest here. Um, I am a very ambivalent person. Uh, I go in and out,
Mm-hmm.
and there's probably some brain chemistry that's behind it. Um, I inherited some of it from my father,
Sure.
but I have tried whenever I can to take the light side and to be somebody who brings joy when he's in a room or who makes other people feel comfortable and relaxed and playful.
Mm-hmm.
And there are times when I can't make that work.
Yeah.
When the other side, when I go down.
Mm-hmm.
And as I say, I wasn't aware that this was a serious issue for me until I was in my 40s, and that's when I got diagnosed with some mild depression, and when I started getting medication to relieve it, and it's been a much easier go for me since then.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing that that small adjustment makes such a huge difference? So, my dad was a psychiatrist
Okay.
in his profession. So he ran. He worked at Fort Sam Houston during Vietnam, working with PTSD soldiers coming back with drug and alcohol rehab, and
Wow.
then moved into Pittsburgh, running the drug and alcohol center for Butler Memorial Hospital, which is north of Pittsburgh, and the psychiatric unit there. So, but at the time, to be honest, because we're always honest, medications were still
Primitive.
primitive in the experimental phase.
Right.
Didn't quite know if they were going to work. Um, but he did see there are times where patients would really respond well to a slight brain chemistry change that's just medical,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's just chemical, made all the difference in somebody's approach to the day. So when did you realize that you might need help? And did you see that because you saw your dad when you were growing up, you saw your dad maybe be afflicted by the black dog?
I knew that my father was afflicted,
Mm-hmm.
um, but it did not really occur to me how much it was affecting my life
Hmm.
until I hit 40. And I basically had a kind of a breakdown.
Hmm.
My first therapist was a puppy that we had. And that was when I had my breakdown. I had taken this puppy out for a walk. It wasn't my puppy. It was supposed to be my daughter's puppy. But she was 7, and he jumped up on his hind legs and knocked her down. And then it became Daddy's puppy.
Hmm.
And so I had to walk it in the dark and in the cold and all that. And it wasn't following any commands. And I was just frustrated. And I sat down on the kitchen floor and sort of broke down in front of the
Oh.
puppy.
Hmm.
And that's when my wife and I agreed it was time to seek some help.
Yeah.
And looking back, it's obvious to me that because of my mood swings and my depression, I probably lost opportunities to be promoted. I definitely lost favor in some jobs and was either fired or pushed aside and forced to leave. And I didn't realize it at the time, but my mood had a lot to do with that.
Hmm.
So I feel like I'm glad when I finally found out what was going on that medicine had become sophisticated enough, and
Yeah.
I found a psychiatrist sophisticated enough to treat me with fairly mild steps, and they've made a huge difference.
Yeah. So that'd be in the 1990s, right?
Exactly, mid
Yeah.
90s.
And that's medicine was a lot better in the 90s than it was in the 70s and 80s. I'll tell you that. Um,
Absolutely.
so my dad suffered from depression too, and he talked about it openly. He said, genetically, boys, this runs through. So does alcoholism, boys. So
Mm-hmm.
we need to be careful genetically because these things run through. And I'm grateful that it skipped me. Right, I kind of dodged that a bit through just genetic luck, I believe. Uh, but I saw how it affected him. And the what I love about your story, Don, is that you got the help, you sought out the help, and all you needed was just a little balance. Um, so, a question for you about your pop: how old was your pop when he passed?
72.
Okay,
And when I was 72, I thought about that a whole lot.
did you?
But he was a physical wreck.
Mm,
He had chronic asthma, which he didn't really treat well because he was afraid of doctors. He was definitely afraid of psychiatrists, but he didn't see doctors very much.
mm,
It developed into emphysema,
mm,
and finally a heart attack triggered the emphysema, or the emphysema triggered the heart attack or something, and he died suddenly.
mm.
Um, but he had been in bad health for years before that.
So he was probably on, like they talk about an outlive. He was probably in that decline, what, for 5+ years, even more.
Probably more.
Yeah. Was that going through your mind as you approached your 60s?
Sure, absolutely. And you know, he was undiagnosed, but I think he was bipolar.
Sure.
He would go through periods of manic activity where he was dangerous to the family checkbook, and then other periods where he would sit in this rocker all day and watch the television and fall asleep in the chair.
Mm,
And it was such an abrupt difference. And my siblings and I felt bad about the fact that we liked him better when he was down because he was
mm,
easier to talk to. because when he was manic, there was no reasoning with him.
Roger, I that bipolar does run through A, is genetic, but B, it doesn't affect just the person. It runs through the whole family, because especially in a parental role, everyone spins around the ups and the downs of that individual.
Absolutely. I mean, I consider myself to have lived a fairly undramatic life, untroubled by trauma. And yet, as more than one therapist has pointed out to me, when you live with a father with serious mental illness, it's traumatic.
Sure.
And there is trauma there. And I didn't get as much of it as some of my siblings did, because I was the oldest and I got out of the house first.
Okay. So about your siblings, A, how many do you have, and B, how old are they?
My sister is a couple of years younger than me. Mm-hmm. Then I have two brothers. One is 7 years younger, and the other one is 18 years younger.
Oh, wow.
Surprise.
It is surprise. So he's what? He's 54 minus 2, so 50, 56-ish or so. So what do you tell them now about your aging? Do you guys have those conversations as siblings?
We do. We try not to make them into what's known as the organ recitals. But we do compare. Well, are you getting this? Well, I've had that. Are you getting that? No, I don't know about that. And some things run through and some things don't. Mm-hmm. But we do talk about those things.
So beyond the physical changes you guys are going through, do you talk about some of the emotional changes and the thinking changes you're going through?
Sure. How it impacts relationships. We've all got very different relationship stories. One divorce, one can't seem to find a relationship at all. One in an unhappy marriage for a long time. So, we're all different, but what we do compare is how growing up affected us and how we had different perspectives on what was happening at the time.
Sure. And now you're with one of the happier couples, right? Married 50 years. Tell me what it's like to kind of age with your partner, right? I mean, you met each other at 24. I mean, I remember 24, right?
And she, by the way, was 19.
Nice. Okay. So 24, 19, really now in our age, kind of really young, right? It seems really young. And as you guys are aging together, what has that been like for the two of you when you kind of reflect on it? And if you have a glass of wine, or I don't know if you drink wine at all, but what do you reflect on together when you kind of look back at that passage of time?
I think one of the things that we look at is the vows that we wrote for ourselves at our wedding. And among the things that we said were, I don't expect you to remain the way you are. I expect you to grow and change. And I'm going to try to keep up with you and respect you through all of that. And I want you to grow, and I want you to be who you are. Obviously, we were trying to be a couple and yet be two individuals with room to grow. And that has really been the story. We have developed in very different ways. At the beginning of the marriage, I was the teacher. We were both in the same career field, but since I was 5 years older, I had gotten there sooner. So I was passing on what I knew as my wife got started. Somewhere along the line, she became the breadwinner as my career kind of stalled out, and she had more patience with difficult people and difficult situations, so she stayed put for longer. And as a result of that, she made it possible for us to retire because she got a very nice state pension.
Wonderful.
To me, it's amazing. She stayed at one job for 28 years. The longest I was ever at a job was 6. So, it's just a different story. But we grew, we changed, and we had to adjust to those changes along the way. Some of those adjustments were easy, some were not. But
was it hard for you, or were you grateful when the balance of the income shifted to where she was carrying a heavier load?
both.
Interesting.
I mean, you talk about manhood. What is more a piece of manhood in America than being the breadwinner?
Right.
So if I'm not the breadwinner, she's the breadwinner, I feel guilty because I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing, right?
Of course.
And she, bless her heart, has been accepting of that. I've had to, adjust to being second fiddle sometimes, and that feels difficult.
If we're being honest.
Yes, but we've found ways to accommodate each other, and we're at the place now where I am doing what I want to be doing, and she's very happy for me that I am. She's doing what she wants to be doing, and I'm happy for her.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And what I like about that honest story, Don, is that that's a very real reaction, right? I think that holding two somewhat contradictory ideas in our mind at once is a really important skill that we learn, and that you have to learn and develop to have, where you can feel guilty for not bringing in the income, but also feel really proud of your wife for being able to do that, and kind of reconciling that sense of manhood as well. I think that one of the challenges, again, it's a theory I can't prove, but there's been a bunch of studies about it, that young people now in their 20s, young men in particular that are in their 20s, many of them don't earn as much as young women in their 20s. In fact, the balance of earnings has shifted more towards women earning more than men.
Wow.
And so I've got 2 daughters. They are 26 and 24. And for them, they're like, yeah, I wouldn't necessarily, unless there's, they still would say, I'm not going to seek out, partners or men who really make less, right? They have to be equal, right? Or at least more, right, than I. My oldest daughter's married, and the 2 of them have worked that out in terms of who they are. My youngest daughter's now dating someone older than her, because she right now at 24 is earning more than 95% of her peers, boys or men or women. Right. And so there's still I still think, I don't know if it's biological, I don't know if it's baked into our DNA. I still think there's a thing that men have with needing to provide.
We have that cultural expectation. It's baked into the culture. Yeah. This is what men do. In similar ways, I think that when men get to retirement age, there's certain things that don't feel right anymore because they're not producing, they're not working. And some of us feel guilty that we are enjoying ourselves. I've had to wrestle with this sometimes.
How so?
Well, first of all, again, I'm 5 years older, so I retired before my wife did. Mm-hmm. So I'm having a great old time at the computer, and I'm writing and having fun, and she's working by the sweat of her brow to provide all of our income. And I don't get active disdain from her. She's quiet about it, but I can't help feeling bad that I'm not doing my part.
Yeah.
And at the same time, but I worked hard. I deserve to rest. So you call it holding contradictory ideas at the same time. I call it being ambivalent, but it's or having multiple perspectives is a nicer way to put it. those things keep swirling around, and they make really good essay topics, but
Right.
they're not that easy to live with.
Yeah, right. They're not easy to live with, but these are the thoughts that we go through. These, and more importantly, too, these are the emotions we go through as well,
Right.
right? As men, where it's funny you mentioned that. There are times when I take like a PTO, paid time off day, right? I take a PTO day, and my wife doesn't. She's working, and she's got a very demanding position that she can do. It's very intellectual and very precise, and it takes a lot of concentration. And when I have my PTO days, we've learned that it's best for me just to be out of the house while she's because she works from home. Because it's like she comes out. Wait a minute, I just did the laundry this morning and I'm working my tail off. And you're what? What exactly are you doing?
Exactly.
And there is a need, I think, to feel like there's contributions being made. I have to believe too, like, and you're feeling this now because you are still making now contribution. At 74, you're making an important contribution with your writing.
One of the things I have learned that has kept me sane is to separate the idea of what I'm doing from expectations of money. Because if you take the money out, it's much easier to live with. If I had to look at what I'm doing in a monetary fashion, it's pennies compared to what she has put in the bank with her pensions and
Sure.
and so forth. But to me, it's pennies, but it's some justification. It says that it's worth something to somebody, and that makes me happy. And it's not for me to compare it to what I was making when I was working for a salary or anything else.
I think you're spot on with that assessment, where the comparative value, well, I'll put this idea out there. Might not land well. You might think I'm totally off target with this. But when you were writing for the newspaper, there's value socially. There's value from getting the news and people understanding that. But you yourself said, let's call it one letter a year, right? Because the other one was a solicitation for you to join up with their religion. In terms of comparative value, and you got paid for it by the institution. But what you're doing now with over 1,000 subscribers, getting active engagement, helping them think about their lives, to me, when you compare the value, what you're doing now seems to me to have much more value.
Well, I would agree. And what I'm saying is that we live in a culture where the only measure of value for most people is financial.
Is financial, right? And I would think, though, and maybe this is age talking, we know that's not true, right? Isn't the value of a really important pastor in a young person's life, or a really important therapist in someone who's struggling, much more valuable in someone's life than a hedge fund manager who gets a $4 million bonus?
I would say so.
Pushing numbers.
Right. I would say so for sure.
Yeah. And
but
I think
that's not how the cultural messages are aligned.
True.
Not
True.
at all.
And I think that's where, who knows, maybe with this generation, they're thinking more about those kind of values, because I think a lot of young people now coming into the workplace are seeing less value in terms of what's being offered in terms of, just finances.
That's true.
I hope so.
Well, Don, this has been time.
I'm sorry, what?
They're just having a harder time generally.
That's true. They are. So, Don, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for sharing so much of your life with me. I do have a final question that I ask all my guests.
Okay.
Who is someone that you know that I don't know that I should know?
That's a great question that you should know for the purposes of talking about.
Just to know.
I can recommend a number of people. You want names, or you want me to send them to you?
Oh, no, I was just, if you've got a name of somebody and describe for me that person and why you think I should know them.
Let me tell you about somebody. When I was 8 years old, in the third grade, I had a really good friend named Bill, who was much taller than me and smarter than me, but I hung around him because there weren't that many smart people to hang around with in Shreveport, Louisiana. And we became good friends, and we stayed friends in the fourth grade. After that, his family moved, and I didn't catch up with him again until I was a teenager, and I had friends in New Orleans, and his family had moved to New Orleans, and by coincidence, he was in school with my friends. So we kept up that way. I reconnected with him about 4 years ago.
Great.
Went to visit him. He's had a fascinating life. He was in the Peace Corps. He was a teacher. He, late in life, went to med school and became a doctor, and just retired from running a clinic in a rural area in North Carolina. Fascinating person. And the wonderful thing is that when we got together, it was like time had not passed. He was still somebody that I really liked and really respected, and he felt the same. And it was such a great feeling.
That is wonderful. That is a fantastic story. That's a blessing.
And you should get to know him.
I would love to. I'd love to meet him. I'd love to meet Bill. And congratulations on having a literally true lifelong friendship.
It's great.
It's invaluable. All right. Well, Don, thank you so much for the chat. I hope you have a wonderful evening, and blessings to you.
Well, thank you, Chris. Appreciate it very much. It's been fun to be on your program.
Great. Have a good night.
Take care.
Well, okay, Mr. Don Akchin. Man, what a fantastic conversation. What a very interesting man. I love his perspective, and I love the idea that at 74, he is flourishing. He has found that beautiful intersection of what he does well, what he loves doing, and the need, that purpose, right? That capital P for purpose. Sometimes we find it later, sometimes we find it earlier. What matters is that we find it. And I also love that he has embraced his age and helping other people embrace their age too. So what do we learn from Don? We learn from Don that when you get older, you can choose to be the wise and gentle sage. You can choose to embrace this age. That's what I learned from him, to plan it. Now remember, his book is called Beyond the Afterwork. You can find it on Amazon. And if you or someone you know is in that age of retirement-ish, in quotes, buy that book. Check it out, again, Beyond the Afterwork. Right? Because retirement, is there such a thing? Maybe you stop working in a career, but retirement to me means that you're put out to pasture and you're done. And I don't think any of us are really done, are we? Aren't we always growing and have the chance to grow? How can you actually say there is a retirement when what you could be doing is learning new things about yourself and pursuing new loves and constantly growing? That's what I learned from Don. Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I hope you enjoy this podcast. I know you have a story to share, and I'd love you to share that story with all of us. Visit menfolkjourney.com and book a conversation. Thanks for listening. Word bid Philared.